After 12 MCU installments, dozens of other superhero films, and hundreds of smashed buildings, Captain America needed to change things up in his third outing if he wanted to keep it from getting stale. Thankfully, we got a complex and fresh take on the team, even if the film isn't the best one released by Marvel. Hey everybody, Alex here for Nerdy Inc., coming at you with a review of Captain America Civil War. Cap 3 features the return of Chris Evans as Captain America and Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Also on the roster is Anthony Mackie, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Paul Rudd, Chadwick Boseman, Elizabeth Olsen, Don Cheadle, Sebastian Stan, Daniel Bruhl, Martin Freeman, Frank Grillo, Paul Bettany, Paul McCartney, Jesse McCartney, Jesse Eisenberg, Aaron Eisenberg, Aaron Paul, Paul Thomas Anderson, Tom Cruise, Tom Holland, Hollandaise sauce, spaghetti and meatballs, meatball subs, subscriptions to Men's Health, health and beauty products, and Emily Van Camp. The film is also way better than Batman v Superman, so let's just get that out of the way up front. Civil War's biggest selling point is the jump in scale, going from Winter Soldier to a de facto Avengers movie. While the more tightly focused Winter Soldier is still my personal favorite film in the MCU pantheon, Civil War's sprawling story certainly works for the film. Whether it's drawing team lines or creating government agendas, Civil War never loses sight of the heart behind the action. In case you're watching this video and don't know what's happening in the film, the destructive events of the prior Marvel films have led to Iron Man siding with a UN accord that would require superheroes to work under UN supervision. Captain America opposes this, primarily on the grounds that the UN could send them to places that they aren't needed, or even worse, keep them from going to places where they are needed. What's excellent about this film is how balanced the setup is. In the comics, Iron Man really is a villain. He makes unethical decisions throughout the course of the story, and Captain America is the moral compass. Things are a lot muddier in the film, and I'd be willing to bet there are viewers who will side with Tony from beginning to end. Though Iron Man is written incredibly well, Captain America doesn't really use all the bullets in his belt to explain his stance on the issue. Armed with the arguments of, remember when Hydra took over S.H.I.E.L.D., and remember when the World Security Council tried to bomb New York, Cap ultimately deals in vague platitudes the majority of the time, and that makes Iron Man's stance all the more reasonable. This, however, is not the emotional drive of the story. Cap's motivations are more driven by his friendship with Bucky and the case of mistaken identities. The events of the film are set into motion and kept in motion by Baron Zemo, who is a subtle and incredibly competent villain. No, he doesn't have the presence of Loki or Red Skull, but the guy knows how to put a plan into action. Speaking of action, let's discuss the action in this film. Even though it appears the Russo brothers, no relation, have doubled down on the headache-inducing shaky cam, the choreography of the action is skyrocketed in quality. If you've read or watched at least one other review, I'm sure the airport fight scene was mentioned. I had high hopes going into that fight scene, and even those were exceeded. It's great not because it's bombastic, but because it's clever and fun. The clash of powers, from force fields to shrinking vehicles, makes for a fight that's really inventive. It's not a joyless fight. You'll be sitting there with a smile on your face the whole time while your heroes duke it out on screen. On the topic of our favorite superheroes, let's discuss Spider-Man. This is the most Spider-Man that Spider-Man has ever Spider-Man'd on film. The strength of Marvel in years past has been that they really understand their characters, and that's no clearer than in this film. Sam Raimi captured the wonder and excitement of Spider-Man in his 66% good trilogy, but Peter Parker was ultimately very quiet and very dull. Mark Webb captured the annoyance of Spider-Man in his 100% terrible duology. Duology? I don't know. Spider-Man did make lots of quips, but they were very angry quips, and he came across more like an internet comment section troll than an actual hero. Tom Holland's Spider-Man does make his signature quips, but he does so far more innocently. I had always read Spider-Man as a kid who was in over his head, and the quips are a way to cope with the stress of what's going on around him. That's exactly what this Spider-Man captures because, when stacked up to the other heroes, he really is in over his head. Speaking of being in over your head, Zack Snyder's Batman vs Superman was a film that tried to do a lot, but it didn't really pull anything off because it wasn't smart enough to do anything well. It's really astounding how much better this film is from Batman v Superman. And I mean that with the utmost sincerity. I'm not trying to be a jerk. The ending of this film does not talk down to its audience at all, and we are thus rewarded with the most thoughtful ending in the MCU to date. BVS used one of the most cliched storytelling devices in this type of story. Civil War does not. I won't spoil anything for you, but have faith in the film. Civil War was an excellent conclusion to Steve Rogers' trilogy. Though it's not a perfect movie, it certainly earns its stars and stripes. So, let's get into some spoilers. The ending of this film was almost a bait and switch in the best possible way. When Bucky, Cap, and Iron Man all walked into the main room of the Siberian bunker, I did actually have a minor worry. Were they going to put aside their differences and fight the group of super soldiers together? If this was a Zack Snyder movie, that's what would have happened. Were they gonna fight a mechanized, souped up Baron Zemo? If this was a Wolverine movie, that's what would have happened. But instead we had a beautiful fight that relied on the emotional state of the characters, rather than CGI overload. There were no doomsday weapons in the air or giant monsters. It was just 3 guys in a room. It was wonderfully restrained and proved that Marvel's characters really are characters, not cardboard cutouts. Hearing Baron Zemo say at the end of the film that he really didn't lose was really powerful, and when Rhodes reminds Stark that their position is just, it hits home. The Avengers are a fractured team, and the team has a lot of ground to cover before Thanos collects his gems. The film isn't perfect, like I said before. So, shall we do a little nitpicking? Nitpick number 1. If Spider-Man really is a nerdy kid, he would have known that on Empire Strikes Back, the ice planet is called Hoth, and the walkers are called AT-ATs, or AT-ATs, which is short for all-terrain armored transports. Come on, Spider-Man, you're a nerdy kid. You should know your Star Wars. Nitpick number 2. Why was homecoming one of the words that was used to trigger Bucky? This is weird because the Spider-Man movie that's coming out soon is called Homecoming. Marvel's known for doing lots of setup, so that was my initial thought, was they're setting up Homecoming. But that word used to trigger Bucky was no more significant than any of the other words that were used to trigger him, so why would that word be something worth investigating in the Spider-Man movie? It's probably nothing, but it's too much of a coincidence. If they're just picking random words, then pick a word that's not the subtitle of your next movie. I also didn't like how Bucky said, "I'm not the only Winter Soldier." Calling those other soldiers Winter Soldiers I didn't really like, only because the Winter Soldier moniker is so closely tied to Bucky that it almost devalued that title. Just say we're not the only super soldiers and move on from there, because they had so little effect on the actual story that it wasn't really worth calling them Winter Soldiers to me. Early in the movie, when Iron Man is standing outside an elevator with another woman, she tells Tony that her son was studying abroad in Sokovia and that he died as a result of Age of Ultron. That's fine. What I didn't like was how she looked at him and said, "My son's dead, and I blame you." A little nuance there could have gone a long way. Number 5. The score in this movie was really generic. The first Avenger and Winter Soldier had a very clearly defined fanfare for Captain America, and whenever he walked on screen, you knew he was on screen. The score here was just sort of meandering and didn't really do anything, and I can't really hum what a song from this movie. It's weird because Henry Jackman did the score for both movies, so why would he abandon his Winter Soldier setup for something less structured in Civil War? So, those are 5 nitpicks, and boy are they nitpicks. If these are the weak points of your movie, then you've made one heck of a movie. This is the first time in a while where I've been interested in what the future holds for the team without actually knowing. Sure, we know Thanos waits down the line, but how things are going to play out between now and then? I'm genuinely curious. I'm curious if Steve is going to form the Secret Avengers with the remaining anti-Accord heroes. I'm curious how quickly Stark is going to change his mind and switch sides. I don't know what's going to happen. And in this day and age, that's a rarity. And those are our thoughts on Civil War. Do you have thoughts of your own? Let us know in the comments down below. Be sure to mark for spoilers until the movie gets a pretty wide release. And for more games, comics, movies, and more, keep it right here on Nerdy Inc.